What is up, everybody? Maine Fly Guys here, gonna do another tutorial. This is one of my personal flies that I use. I was actually considering not showing it to you guys because it's my own personal personal fly. It's just a Mayfly, pretty common, but the body is with a natural material, and with all the synthetics out there, you know, you just don't see it very often. So it's kind of a play off of a dun, but just start a couple eye lengths behind, start your thread. Here I have two mallard flanks. This is just a nice golden wood duck color. I tie them in like this, and I'm gonna pull them back. So I tie them in sort of back here, just like 3 loose wraps, not tight, loose, because you're going to hold both ends and pull it back slowly, and you can check and say, okay, so that usually the wings I like to be about as long as the body, and that's pretty close, so that's good. So once you've got it, you can cinch it down. It will want to roll. It will want to roll on you, so make sure you're pinching it down. Once you're good, you're going to come in and cut at an angle downward, so like this, right to about the tail, pretty close to the tail. Alright, so now you got it. I would still hold it and work back, just securing in the feather. And what you'll end up with is sort of a nice tapered body. Don't worry too much about getting it perfect, although it is nice and it looks good. But alright, so you definitely want plenty of room by the eye. So I've still left myself an eye length, maybe even 2. But what I do is I go back to the front and I just separate out where that sort of natural divide is, and I can see it. And you'll be able to see it if you just kind of mess with the fibers, just kind of push them back and forth. It's right there. And when I find it, I just crisscross my thread to really separate it out. So there's my divide. You don't want your feathers, you don't want the wings to go forward too much, you kind of want them to be upright. So after a few wraps, what I'll do is I'll pull them back and I'll go out front of them and kind of lock them in. Alright, so this is just very rough. Here's what you have. See, they're nice and straight, nice and separated. If you have a few fibers that are not cooperating, don't worry, it's not the biggest deal in the world. But that looks pretty good. Once you're happy with it, what I do, so here's my wings, and they're pretty good actually, they came out pretty good. What I do is I just take the smallest drop of super glue or UV glue possible, and I go on the underside. I make sure they are where I want them to be, and I'll just do one little drop on the bottom and one little drop on the top. Make sure if you do this, this is just for security, I just do it so they don't roll, but if you do this, make sure that your wings are where you want them to be, because they're not moving after that. Alright, if there is any errant fibers that you want to get rid of, so like this little fiber down here, I don't really like that, so get a pair of good tweezers and you can just kind of come in and remove it. So there it is, looks pretty good. Try to get my lighting going here. Looks pretty decent, and we're gonna keep going. So the next step is the tail, and what I do, this one's gonna be an olivey color, is I come in from just an old strung saddle, rooster saddle, and find a crappie feather, and I use these fibers on it. I like how they look. They're very, very thin, and so I'll just take a little clump and I'll try to get all the fibers to be even length, something like that. Now you can do a thicker tail or a shorter tail, it doesn't matter, but I like it to be the length of the body of the fly. So right about there, mark it out, and cinch that in, make sure it doesn't roll on you. There we go. So you get something like that, and you know, if you want a neater tail, something straight, I kind of like mine to be a little fluffy, but whatever you want, doesn't matter. So before going forward, you're gonna cut this at an angle, so just, it should already be propping up, so you can just snip it right before the wings. So this will just keep the body and keep that same taper. The next step is the body, and this is where, I don't know, I just don't see this a lot, but here's a feather, a stem, same one as the tail came from, and I've just stripped it, so it's this nice fine quill. And what I do is, there's a colorful side, which you can see there, it's pretty green, and then on this side it's a little lighter. You want the colorful side to be facing down, and how I determine that is I keep the tips of the feather on, so I know which way to orientate it, because you're going to tie it in from the tip first. Now the tip of this feather is very, very frail and breaks easily, which is probably why people don't use it, because they don't like fighting with it, especially with all the synthetics out there. And I don't blame them, because I do the same thing a lot. But it does make a very unique looking body, which you guys will see shortly. So I wrap up, making sure my wraps are concentric and trying to touch as best they can. Once you get there, I snip off the body, and I'll begin my wraps. Now when you begin your wraps, it's going to be such a small amount of material, just don't freak out, and go slow, because if you nick the hook with the feather, it's done. You've broken it. So you want to just take your time and go really, really slow. I would not use the rotary for this function, because you really need good control for the first 5 or 6 wraps. Once you get past the first 5 or 6 wraps, it becomes a little more durable. And when you get towards the end, it becomes very, very durable. So here I'm just doing touching wraps, and just makes this segmented sort of look to it. Very fine segmented, it almost looks flush, you know. Alright, so I'm coming towards the end. So when you come towards the end of it, it will get pretty thick and difficult to turn. Do not let it go, but go as far as you can. And what you'll notice is a color change. Once you hit that sort of color change, it's time to secure it. This is a size 16 mustad dry, so this isn't the biggest of hooks. Alright, so I've done my body, looks good. It's secured in there, I've wrapped it a few times. You're going to want to lay this straight so you can really secure it in all the way to out front of the wings. That's when you can cut it, snip it off, and I just kind of work around it and cinch it in to make sure it's really in there. Because when this body, if you guys can see, it's very, I mean, it's really segmented. It's so fine, and I'll take some pictures of it so you guys can see. But it's so hard to get a good sort of angle of it. But anyways, so now I'm just gonna do some hackle, some pretty traditional hackle. I just have some brown, some dark brown, and some grizzly. I don't really care for this look on most of my flies. It's original, I understand it's original, but this looks really well with the olive color. So here I have just some brown hackle and some grizzly hackle, and I'm just going to tie it in right behind the wings. And my goal for wraps is 4. I want to get 4. Come on. I want to get 4 wraps with my hackle, and there we go. 4 wraps, which is, you know, I think that's fine. It looks bushy enough. It's all about being bushy. You know, is your fly bushy? Does it float well? Well, sometimes it's not all about the bush, okay? So, once I've secured that in, things are looking pretty good. My wings are still good. My body's looking good. I'll put in some fine dubbing, and really fine. This is micro fine dubbing. This is a blue-winged olive gray by Hairline. It's really cool stuff, but you want like the littlest amount possible. Like that. I mean, you can barely even see that on the camera there. Just enough to cover the thread, basically. And if I'm using sheer 14-aught, it's like a grayish color. If that shines through a little bit, I'm totally okay with that, because it kind of goes with the color scheme. So, all right, that looks about good. So now I'm just gonna wrap around, and you'll see my little thorax come to life. I'll still do a little X pattern to cover up my thorax, and there we are. So now I still have room at the eye. You know, I still have plenty of room to kind of work with, and that's where I'm gonna cinch my hackle down. So here I'm just going to grab my hackle with some pliers and try to get 4 turns. That's my goal. There's 1. There's 2. There's 3. On the 3rd turn, I'll come out front of the wings. And then there is my 4th. And how does that look? Pretty good, not too shabby. So then I'll lock that in out front. Right out front of the eye, trying not to trap any fibers, or as few as possible. You'll always get 1 or 2, but alright, so once that's locked in, you can give it a trim. Again, be careful not to trim any of your fibers that you want on your fly. And so I'll come back and just take a peek at it, and it looks pretty good. Yeah, not too bad. Of course it could be fuller, but you know, all flies could be fuller. And then what I'm going to do is, I don't like to whip finish these flies. I like to half hitch them, because you trap less fibers when you do a couple half hitches. Whereas if you did a, there we go, if you did a other technique, you might trap some feathers in there. So there's our fly. Not too bad. Wings look good. Everything's in place. Very buggy underneath. I also come in at the very end, and instead of using glue, I'll use some instead of using like super glue or anything like that, like head cement, I'll use this UV glue, and it This is Loon UV Thin, and it just kind of soaks in to the fibers, so I like that. And the last thing I do here is I'll come in and I'll rip out any fibers I see. So like here's a few hanging out back and I don't like them, so I'll rip them out just to make sure my hackle is kind of all pointing the same way and nothing crazy is going on. So there we go, that looks pretty decent. Again, it's sort of a play off of a dun. I think it's more of the original dun patterns that used to be before the synthetic materials were out. So that's the fly. Very, very buggy looking fly, and I hope you guys liked it. Let me know if you have any comments, and I'll see you later. Thanks.